Joe Tate's secret plan to take control of Butler's farm is now on the verge of being discovered by Emmerdale's sharp-tongued matriarch, Kim Tate. People sometimes forget how ruthless Joe can truly be. Only last December, villains like Celia Daniels and Ray Walters were the main troublemakers in the village, while Joe's only festive plan appeared to be proposing to Dawn Taylor. However, appearances can be deceiving. The wealthy schemer is currently at the peak of his manipulative game, motivated entirely by greed. After Kim Tate asked him to help buy up the land surrounding Home Farm, Joe aggressively began targeting Butler's farm, determined to obtain it by any method possible. To achieve this, he resorted to blackmailing Victoria Sugden over the death of her brother in self-defense, and even manipulated Robert Sugden into setting up Moira Barton for the crimes committed by the drug-dealing trafficker Celia. His actions naturally made him an enemy of Cain Dingle, who was furious that his wife ended up in prison for a long sentence, especially while he himself was secretly coping with a prostate cancer diagnosis. Cain, known as the most hot-headed man in the Dales, refused to be pressured by Joe into selling his wife's farm and business. In true Dingle fashion, he took revenge by stealing Joe's prized DeLorean car. Joe quickly retaliated by setting a clever trap, leaving another expensive vehicle in the village as bait and capturing Cain on camera when he tried to steal it. With Cain caught in the act and facing the threat of prison, Joe presented him with a harsh ultimatum: sell Butler's farm. After visiting Moira in prison and admitting everything to her, Cain ultimately had no choice but to accept her decision to give up the farm. As if the situation wasn't already dramatic enough, the Tate family's ambitious plans were interrupted last month by the unexpected return of Graham Foster, who was believed to be dead. Graham, who had once mentored Joe and had previously been married to Kim, strongly disapproved of the ruthless methods the Tates were using to expand their business empire. He believed there must be a more honorable way to achieve success, which is why Joe chose to keep his true plans hidden. That decision turned out to be wise, because although Kim supports growing the Tate empire, she has already criticized Joe for his aggressive tactics. She even warned him to stop pressuring Moira into selling the farm while she was still dealing with the consequences of Celia's crimes. Unfortunately, Joe ignored Kim's advice, and the Home Farm matriarch remained unaware that her own step-grandson was secretly responsible for Moira ending up in prison, until now. In the upcoming episodes of Emmerdale, Kim begins to grow suspicious and pushes Joe to finally tell the truth. Meanwhile, Cain reluctantly moves in with the Dingle family and spends time drinking with them in a foul mood. Suddenly Joe arrives and unexpectedly offers Lydia Dingle a pay rise. The Dingles immediately become suspicious of his motives, but Kim, who is watching closely, is even more doubtful about Joe's intentions. Curious about why Joe is suddenly being so generous to her favorite employee and closest friend, Kim confronts him later in the week. She pressures him to reveal the truth, and eventually Joe admits something that leaves her completely shocked. The big question remains: has Joe just confessed his plan to frame Moira? Emmerdale has revealed who might be able to prevent Paddy, Dylan, and Bear from ending up in prison. At the moment, the three men are still trying to argue that they acted in self-defense and were mainly witnesses to the incident. However, there is a major complication with that claim because they decided to bury the body afterward. This means they are still connected to a serious criminal offense. Previously, they tried to insist they had no involvement in the situation, but that strategy is no longer realistic. Instead, their new approach is to tell the full truth about what happened and explain that Bear was only trying to protect Paddy and Dylan. Despite this plan, Paddy worries that everything might already be lost after the information Bear shares with the police. However, there may still be someone who could support their case: Laurel Thomas. Earlier, Ray revealed the truth to Laurel and admitted who he really was and what he had been involved in. Because of this, her testimony or any evidence she provides could potentially help their situation. There is also hope that new information might come to light later, details that have not yet been discussed or discovered. Unfortunately, the case is complicated because some of the people who witnessed the events have since died, meaning the key witnesses who could have supported their story are no longer around. As a result, escaping punishment could be extremely difficult and may require something close to a miracle. On a positive note, the recent tension between Paddy and Laurel has already been resolved, despite the earlier conflict caused when Laurel secretly took Bear to Ray's funeral. In the end, they quickly reconciled, as emotions had been running high and everyone involved had been stressed and protective during the situation. New Emmerdale spoilers for next week reveal that Graham begins to suspect Joe's latest scheme against the Dingle family. In the current storyline, Moira Dingle decided to sell Butler's farm to the Tate family after Joe secretly interfered to make the deal happen. Cain Dingle was not pleased with his wife's decision, but Moira believed selling the land would protect their family's future, while she remains in prison for a double murder she did not actually commit. After buying the farm, Joe chose Robert Sugden to become the new tenant farmer, which means the Sugden family will once again run the land. However, it looks like Joe is far from finished with his manipulative plans. As Robert and his fiancée, Aaron Dingle, move into the farm, and the Dingles begin discussing the possibility of starting a new farm elsewhere, Joe suddenly turns his attention to Lydia Dingle. Cain, who had been living away for years, eventually agrees to move back into the Dingle home despite his initial reluctance. Not long after, the Dingle family grows suspicious when Joe unexpectedly arrives and apologizes to Lydia for recent events. He then surprises everyone by offering her a pay rise, which also makes Kim Tate question what his real intentions might be. Emmerdale has revealed who might help Paddy, Dylan and Bear avoid possible prison sentences. The three characters face an intense week ahead as D.S. Walsh gets closer to discovering the truth about what really happened to Ray Walters. In an attempt to shield his loved ones, Bear chooses to lie to the police and claims that he intentionally killed Ray. However, Paddy and Dylan refuse to allow Bear to take the blame alone, so they decide to turn themselves in as well. Because of this decision, both men risk being charged with perverting the course of justice. At the moment, they are still trying to argue that the incident happened in self-defense and that they were simply witnesses to the events. The major issue with this explanation is that they later chose to hide the body, which connects them directly to a serious offense. Their earlier attempts to deny involvement are no longer believable, so they have decided on a new strategy. Instead, they plan to tell the full story of what happened and explain that Bear was only acting to protect Paddy and Dylan during the confrontation. Despite the serious situation, tensions between the characters calm down quickly after the earlier conflict. In the end, emotions had simply been running high, with everyone feeling anxious and protective of each other. Emmerdale airs on weeknights at 8 p.m. on ITV1 and can also be streamed on ITVX.